Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Billboard. I'm your host, Greg Wise, along with my co host, Charlie Riley. And we have a very exciting guest today to share with the world. This is James Heller, founder and CEO of Wrapify. Very excited to get into the wonderful world of moving ads. And James is the pioneer in the space. So, really excited to hear from him. Look, James is the founder and CEO of Wrapify. The company turned everyday drivers into mobile ad platforms and gave brands a new way to literally wrap their message around the real world. And he was the first to do it. And he's been on all sorts of lists in terms of fastest growing companies. But James, you do a much better job than I do. We've known each other for a few years now, being in the space together. Tell the folks who you are and what Wrapify is.
Sure. Greg, Charlie, thanks for having me. But yeah, my name's James Heller. I'm the CEO and founder at Wrapify. We're the nation's leading rideshare and mobility advertising platform. And what we really do is provide brands the ability to scale out of home pretty much anywhere in the US. And we do it on rideshare and gig delivery vehicles. So folks that drive for platforms like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart, et cetera. And then the main reason why they buy it isn't just because we're putting stickers on cars, but our ability to actually provide media measurement, data visualization, attribution, the ability to trigger retargeting from this really high recall out of home. And yeah, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary in January.
Congrats. That's awesome. Welcome to the show. We are big fans of Wrapify here at One Screen. We've done several campaigns together for our clients. And me personally, I'm a big believer in ads that move. And wrapped cars are a big component of that. Curious, James, what made you start Wrapify? Give the folks a little bit of background.
So by trade, I'm a marketer. I'm a digitally native marketer. I was a marketing director for a data center and cloud provider. I went on to running global digital marketing for a cloud division of a Fortune 50, Ingram Micro. And I was always fascinated by out of home, but back then, the overarching theme of out of home is it was great top of funnel brand marketing, but it was really hard to measure. And if you're a digital marketer, it was like, you're not touching that. And so I thought that was always ridiculous. All the parts seemed like they were on the table to build something that was measurable. The rise of Uber and Lyft and gig economy there was no ad component. And so I wanted to use a product. So I went searching to see if there was some company out there that offered a service that was similar to what I envisioned the early days of Wrapify to be. And yeah, I ultimately quit the cushy Fortune 50 job and cashed out the 401k and sold a bunch of cars and things and put it all into getting Wrapify started. And yeah, the rest is history.
Got it. The classic entrepreneurship. It is not for the faint of heart, ladies and gentlemen, but you have a success story here in James, and they're doing great. James, just for folks listening too, so you mentioned digital marketers. You're a digital marketer by trade, performance oriented. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing in the world of performance marketing today? Just overall, the state of marketing.
I think one of the things we're seeing is as privacy concerns become more and more of a hurdle for all these different ad platforms, our ability to be hyper targeted down to a very specific psychographic group or age group or even location, those things are changing. And the big walled garden platforms like Meta and Google are getting really expensive. We're seeing CPMs in the north of the $20 to $30 range. Some of our clients in different verticals, some of them have CPMs in the north of 50. And so you're seeing this kind of law of diminishing returns with pure play performance digital as like your main strategy. And so I think that what we're seeing is performance marketers are looking at ways to augment and increase performance of their digital channels. And that's creating the bridge to using things like out of home, using things like connected TV and audio streaming. And so I think that the landscape is changing. The other thing that I think is interesting is I was a digital marketer first, right? I never really got to experience being a brand marketer using traditional mediums until long after I'd been spending a decade plus in just pure play digital. So we're seeing more of that. We're seeing more. In fact, it's commonplace now for most marketers to be native digital marketers, right? The word digital marketing is ridiculous, right? Because that's all, in many cases, that's all they're doing. and using traditional is almost like a new thing for them. So yeah, I think it's flip-flopped. I think the last piece that I'd say here that's related to it is I think we've also started to see less of a, oh wow, I didn't know that you could measure that, or I didn't know you could do that, to more of a, I think you could do this, or I think you could measure this. How do we take this audience data and integrate it into our multi-touch attribution model? That's becoming more and more common.
Yeah.
Are you seeing, it's a great point about the redundancy of digital marketing, or marketers, but are you seeing more of those that are coming from either the demand gen, or who sits in that seat, or the brand marketer who's coming to you looking for solutions? Or is it a mix of both? Like they're working together, like marketing and sales has to, but where are you seeing like the interest coming from? Like, how do we round out our channels with something like mobile ads, or like you said, CTV or something else?
I think what's actually happening is those two desks are converging. And so it's no longer this guy and this guy, or this gal and this gal. They're becoming the same. Or we're actually having meetings where they're both sitting at the table. And that's really cool. And that's really good news for out of home as a category in general, because that's gonna grow the pie. We're this environment of 4 to 5% CAGR year growth over year is the only way I think we're going to really fundamentally change that is by pulling media spend from digital. But yeah, I think we're seeing more of that. When we're sitting down with a client, a brand client, and they say something like, hey, we're over indexing on Google and Facebook, we know they're going to buy out of home. It's almost like a keyword. We know that they're going to be making an investment in out of home. And it's kind of obvious to me. There's several studies on it. OAAA has done some studies. Facebook even published a study in Europe about how out of home made Meta 30% more performant. And yeah, that makes sense. Like you're creating a bunch of brand recall before the digital's displayed for the consumer. Of course, it's going to be more performant. There's recall at the forefront. So I think that's become like the understanding of how all these different media products work together is becoming less of a just brand versus just performance, and the two are kind of meeting in the middle.
It's truly unbelievable. The pendulum is swinging back. To your point, this idea of digital marketing only, and marketing, and I've talked about this a lot, it really became a finance role more than it was a creative role. And we're now seeing the emergence of both. And a lot of the performance oriented marketers, and I don't blame them, and no fault of their own, they don't really know much about out of home because it's this sort of old school, archaic medium to them. However, it's the only offline channel that's consistently been growing year over year. And what's fascinating about Wrapify and the idea of wrapping a vehicle, for example, is even if folks do know about out of home, they immediately think of billboard, right? They don't realize how many different formats there are in out of home, which is why Wrapify and wrapped cars end up on a lot of plans that our customers end up doing, because it can go to places where other inventory doesn't. Tell me, what are some of those use cases that you see with your clients, and why leveraging wrapped cars?
Yeah, I mean, and there are several industry vertical use cases that are now becoming a wash, rinse, repeat in those different verticals.
Yep.
But I look at this subcategory of out of home as like the glue between the really traditional inventory and digital. I'd say the lowest common denominator use case is there is no out of home inventory, so they use Wrap because we could deploy it anywhere. The better use case is we want to create more reach and frequency in parts of the market that we're going after, markets that we're going after, where inventory is kind of limited, and then we'll use maybe more traditional roadside assets on those big road segments going into a city center, and then they'll buy maybe some digital inventory near some big points of interest. That's more of a cohesive. It's why you'd work with a one screen, right? Or why you'd work with a specialty shop that's using a platform that helps orchestrate this buy. And so I think there's another thing that's happening, and one screen's a really big part of this, is marketers have so many things to buy, right? There's so many things out there that they could buy. There are things that are legacy buys that nobody gets fired for buying. And then there's stuff that actually works. And then there's what's in between. And so you have this, how do you make good use of your time in identifying what's out there, what's really cool, but maybe not as performant, and what is super performant, but really hard for you to attach like a metric that you could go to your CFO and say, hey, this is what we spent money on. This is what it did in terms of marketing performance or ROI to the bottom line. So yeah, I think that's kind of going off of the same vein of Wrapify's evolution in out of home and media in general. You have these really cool platforms, and OneScreen being a leader in that, making it easier for that marketer to make an informed decision and go back to their leadership and say, hey, this is what we bought, here's why, and this is how it plays into the story.
So James, tell me about that. So almost every marketer, before doing an out-of-home campaign, especially if they've not done one previously in their professional career, how would you recommend measuring out of home, like this brand perspective? And then secondly to that is, how does Wrapify do measurement with out of home?
Yeah, great question. I think that it's important to not attach the measurement methodology that you're used to with a banner ad to out of home. I think if you do that, you're missing the point, and you'll also miss out on the true performance of the channel. I think the way you look at it is, yeah, you want to be able to build an expose versus control. There's several amazing platforms that do that out of the box. And then there are also third-party vendors that could help you with that. Wrapify has it. It's all part of the product. So you get attribution when you buy Wrapify. You get media measurement. You get data visualization. It's all part of the product. And so, yeah, doing expose versus control and then being able to show brand lift during a campaign and then at the end of the campaign, super important. Doing things like so it depends on the brand. So if the brand is selling something in an e-commerce transaction, being able to measure global website visitation from the out-of-home exposure versus everything else that the brand was doing. So that's your expose versus control. That's really high level. All the way down to maybe you want to measure that specific product SKU in the shopping cart transaction as a result of the out-of-home exposure throughout the flight of that campaign. You could do that. And a lot of marketers don't know that even exists. That's another big keyword when we're talking to brands, is when we walk them through what we could do with attribution and retargeting, and they say things like, oh, wow, I didn't know you could do that. They're probably going to buy. So it's a big education push right now. You don't have to educate brands on like the value of this 30 sheet poster, right? That's a real estate sale. It's not a performance marketing sale. So it's very different. That's why our sales organization is probably a lot different than, say, like a traditional billboard company like a Lamar, Clear Channel, or Outfront.
When you talk about, that's a great point, James. Yep. It's got to be like one of those aha moments that a marketer has. For you guys, it's got to be great. But to highlight the different data sources that can be used for measurement is obviously valuable because they have to sell this internally. But can you talk about maybe some of those aha moments that marketers have when you talk about the planning process and the data that goes into where you can place cars, where you can place ads, how you use that data to put, we talk about this a lot. We use a lot of data sources to build the right plan, to put the assets in front of the right decision makers. But for you guys, it's probably very similar. Can you, like, are there aha moments that you hear from marketers on the planning side of your work?
Oh, all the time. And it really does come down to the type of brand vertical and like what the campaign is actually going to, or what they're setting out to achieve with the campaign. So I'll give you an example. We were working with a really large CPG brand that was launching a new cereal product in Walmart locations. That's a very specific go-to-market, right? So how are they going to capture an audience around the specific Walmart locations in that region? They have to first look at, okay, what out-of-home inventory is available on the road segments? How do we create more recall before the shopper walks into the store? Because there's a whole nother universe of shopper marketing that they do once they're in the store. But they want to establish recall. They want to establish this is a brand I'm thinking about before I walk into the store. And yeah, there might not be a billboard or digital inventory within a 1 mile radius of that Walmart. And so that's another example of, okay, we could get vehicles driving around key shopping hours around every single one of those Walmart locations, all the road segments that circumvent those Walmart locations. Oh, wow, I did not know you could do that. We should definitely do that. We should also look at other media that hits the soccer mom between this age range and this average household income. So you're using psychographic targeting, you're using point of interest location targeting, you're using either brute force looking for the inventory manually, or you're using a platform like OneScreen that helps orchestrate what inventory is available based on those points of interest and those psychographic and demographic filters. So I think that when they see that, oh, wow, I didn't know that these things made it easy for me to place the buy, it creates a lower threshold and more of a willingness to say, hey, yeah, let's put the budget into this versus going and spending a bunch of money on something that's going to be not as performant.
Essentially, people don't realize that you can use data to plan and measure out of home. It is not the app from 30 years ago.
Yeah, and I would say to this year, 2025, it's definitely more commonplace, but we still have a ways to go. I think we're still probably close to, I'd say we're probably in line with autonomous vehicle and the prevalence of autonomous vehicles across the US. I think we're probably in the same growth trajectory in terms of the realization that you could do all this with data today. I think we're probably about 10 years away from it to becoming more commonplace. And yeah, the smart marketers, the ones that are ahead of the curve, are the ones that are leveraging this. And I think marketing is a zero-sum game. And I think that the marketers that latch onto this and squeeze all the juice out of it early are the ones that are going to get the most value.
To your point earlier about having to suspend like last touch attribution, it's that whole mix and figuring out that this is a piece. And I know we chatted before, you use the word glue a lot. Like out of home is a glue piece to putting all that together, and that it's fighting that digital ad fatigue. It's fighting those rising digital costs. So it's adding that together. I think that, like you said, it's measurement's getting better, but it's one of those things where all those recall factors and all those touch points go into every study you see now. It goes up and up, but it's 200 touches someone needs to integrate with a brand. It used to be like 15. So we're inundated with so many impressions now and so many brands talking to you. It should be a piece of that in the real world. Maybe one thing that you told us before, for marketers that haven't tried out of home, they haven't thought creatively about how you fight some of that digital ad fatigue. What are some lessons that somebody who's maybe on the fence about channels like this, what are some things that you've seen marketers learn that you could help maybe some others avoid?
I think one of the things that happens pretty often, and this will happen in a sales process at Wrapify, and I'm sure it happens to some level at OneScreen. When we have a brand who is interested in out of home, and they want to use it, but the budget that they want to use to test it is not enough for it to really make a difference. I think it's our responsibility to guide them, because if they have a bad experience with not enough budget, they're going to go, oh, this channel doesn't work. We're not going to use it anymore. And there have been several situations where we're talking to a brand and they tell us what the budget they want to use to test. And we'll tell them, like, that's just not enough. You should go invest those dollars in other channels, maybe work on brand and messaging and creative, and do everything you can there so that when you are ready to invest and this actually becomes you have an amazing ROAS story for your CFO. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the, I'd say, early lessons is when you have a brand who sees that they have access to out of home and doesn't really do it the right way by not putting enough inventory out there or not a long enough time to create the frequency or the reach that they need for it to actually make a difference. And then they write off the channel saying it doesn't work. I think that's I'd say, first learning. The second is getting up to speed on how the measurement and out of home actually parlays with the way you do measurement for all of your other stuff. I think that is another big learning curve. And even some of the biggest brands on the planet are still trying to figure it out. So don't beat yourself up for not understanding how it works right off the bat. It is a learning curve. There is a bunch of different ways to do it. There are several different providers that could help with it. And I think it's just, it's a matter of doing it the right way, at least doing it the right way at the first time, so you're not getting a false negative. And then when you actually are working on it and doing this, you've got the right measurement partners and platforms in place to make it an easy and transparent process for your management.
You bring up something that I think is critical, which is it's a consultative conversation. And I know because we've worked together for a while on several campaigns, and this is something that we here at OneScreen also pride ourselves in. It is consultative. We won't just do a plan if asked by a client. It has to be backed by data. and quite frankly, be able to make the proper impact based off of whatever business objective that they have. I learned that early on with out of home. You don't ever want to be an order taker. And this is for marketers and brands out there, is that's what you should be looking for in a partner, is someone who's going to actually say, no, don't do this campaign. I remember the first time it happened, it was very uncomfortable, but that client ended up being a long-term client doing a lot of out of home, but being really successful with that first one that they did. Got to ask you with the time we have, because you have some awesome logos that you guys have worked with. Zoom, Credit Karma, Rocket Mortgage, Major League Baseball, other professional sports organizations. What are some cool campaigns, fun campaigns you guys have done? Maybe pick one or two. How many cars did they do? Also try to work in, because folks are going to want to know what swarms are. So if you mentioned swarms,
Yeah.
what is that? Because I love to tell folks about what a swarm is.
Cool. Yeah, happy to do it. I think that one of the brand that comes to mind immediately is in terms of most fun is Zoom. We started working with Zoom before they were, I think, even in the top 5 video conferencing platform, maybe not even in the top 10. Like Skype still existed. You could get Google Hangouts when it was called Hangouts for free. Their Teams wasn't even a thing yet. Blue Jeans was a thing. There are all these different, there was this ecosystem of video conferencing. Zoom was a paid product competing with free products. And they ultimately they ended up winning. And they ended up winning the pandemic. And they did a couple things really well. One of them was they leaned into out of home very hard. They pretty much took over all of the roadside inventory leading into any big tech or business center within a given tier 1 market. They used Wrapify heavily. They deployed thousands of vehicles across 10 plus DMAs. And they are a longstanding and continue to be a longstanding brand client. I've worked with them for going on 5 years now. And being able to actually measure folks signing into their admin portal of Zoom for the first time, which you wouldn't get to that unless you were a paid user from the out-of-home exposure. So like that kind of stuff, where you have a brand, where we got to be part of a brand's journey, and they were the poster child of that era in marketing. I mean, there was SNL sketches. If you're in an SNL sketch as a brand, like, I think you made it, right? So that was really cool. It was really cool to be a part of that story. We've done some really interesting things with some of the different sports leagues, like Major League Baseball. So we're an approved MLB vendor. We've worked with a handful of the different franchises. But being able to measure home game visitation from the out-of-home exposure, and it's dramatic. Like the lift that we create for those sports teams is pretty incredible. And so that's another reason for why we're able to work with a bunch of those MLB teams, because when one says, hey, this really works, like we're able to drive a 3x increase, a 300% increase in home game visitation compared to everything else we're doing in market. That's really neat. And be able to target neighborhoods where families with kids live, knowing that, hey, these are the pockets of the market where we could deploy out of home, where there is no out of home, and we can measure that exposure back to butts and seats. So like that's really cool. It's really cool to see that whole thing work. There's so many different really interesting use cases. Like on the B2B tech side, ABM is a really big focus for marketers using out of home in general. But yeah, they'll work with us. We'll get under MNDA. They'll send us, hey, here's the list of enterprise clients that our field sales folks are going after. Help us identify pockets of markets across the U.S. where the highest density of decision makers live, and let's go deploy Wrapify there. So there's all these use cases that you would never probably guess that like a car wrapping out of home platform would be involved in. So it turns out like B2B tech is a big percentage of our revenue. So yeah, there's several different use cases. They're different when a leader in a brand vertical or industry vertical leverages Wrapify, pretty much the entire vertical follows.
Yeah.
So it's been super fun. And yeah, I mean, we've, of the top 100 brands in the US, I think we work with like 26 of them. In the top 10, I think we work with 5 of them. So it's really cool to see the validation. It's cool to see that the brand's leaning in.
We talk a lot about the performance side of out of home, which is obviously different than what folks expect when they talk or have a conversation around out of home. But what you got, the format you have is just, I think out of home is awesome. But wrapping a fleet of cars and having them lined up together outside of a conference center, outside of a stadium, outside of a target account, or swarming together, which is essentially each car in tandem, think about 5, 10, 15, 20 cars, that turns heads. You
It
look
does. Yeah, you mentioned Swarm. So yeah, Swarm is the feature that brands have access to get a chunk of the vehicles in their campaign to drive around a specific point of interest at a specific time. And it's used in pretty much all Wrapify campaigns. It's nascent, right? It's not normal to see it. It creates a ton of recall because of the nascency, right? And yeah, you're showing up as a brand, you're showing up. And when you look at what you could spend on a conference, like being a lanyard sponsor or wrapping like the staircase to a part of the venue that nobody goes to, the same amount of money you could basically own what's going on outside the event. Yeah, everybody walking into that venue is going to see it. So we see a lot of brands going, hey, instead of the bag sponsor, the lanyard sponsor, or wrapping one elevator door for 50 grand, why don't we get a bunch of vehicles driving around that venue for the days of that conference? And so we're seeing more of that. It still makes up a single digit percentage of our revenue. So events are part of Wrapify, but not what makes Wrapify what it is. It's definitely an important piece though, and a growing piece.
All the use cases you just gave that's great. And I think you summarized what the title of this podcast is, Beyond the Billboard, because most people
literally
might think a billboard, but like all those use cases you just provided, especially ABM for B2B, and using data to figure out where to put those swarms, and then report on it. It's incredible. So kudos to what you've built for over 10 years. James, where can people find you?
Best place to find Wrapify is Wrapify.com. Obviously, LinkedIn is a big one for us. I'm a pretty open book. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Love to chat with other marketers about what they're working on. And guys, I really do appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, James.
You're a great follow on LinkedIn, so definitely go check them out. And for any campaigns to make an impact, like the examples James just talked about, they're an awesome resource for out of home. So thanks for jumping on with us, and we really appreciate all the examples you gave.
All righty. Thanks, guys. We'll see you.
Thanks, James.